ANKE RICHTER, thanks so much for coming on to Talk Beliefs all the way from New Zealand. You are an international journalist, foreign correspondent and author based at Christchurch. Your book, Cult Trip Inside the World of Coercion and Control, has just been released internationally, an investigative account of 3 major cults as well as a coercive group that you were once part of, but now look back on with criticism. So how are you doing, Anke? A Cult Trip is about to hit the bookstores in Europe, so are you excited about the launch?
Hi, Mark. Absolutely. That's a milestone for me. It became a bestseller here in New Zealand last year, but to actually see my baby take these steps out to the world, and I think it's relevant for lots of people wherever they are in the world. My book is actually quite international, yes.
Before we dive into that 10-year investigative journey that led to the Cult Trip book, let's just hear a little bit about your background. Anke, is there anything that you remember from your past that may have sparked your interest in cults and coercive groups?
Well, I guess the fact alone that I was born and raised in Germany has maybe something to do with it as well, because of our national history and coming to terms with the fact that a whole country can be misled. And growing up with post-war parents, always pondering these big questions of collective guilt and redemption, and why do good people end up doing bad things? That's always been part of my life, like so many people of my generation. I had a Christian phase when I was a teenager, loved singing by the campfire, being a youth leader, the whole sort of loved up feeling of believing in the right thing and doing the good thing for Jesus. So maybe I caught some kind of bug there very early on, even though that didn't last very long with Christianity, and spent a year at school, at a boarding school, a Rudolf Steiner boarding school in England, actually. So that was my first experience of, I guess, group living away from home. And again, it really, I loved it. I think I've always been looking for communities that are a bit outside of the norm, maybe. I lived in Tokelau in the South Pacific for 7 months on an atoll with my family as a doctor's wife. I spent some time on alternative farms when I took a break from my TV job. So there's always been this other side, searching for a little bit more than what mundane professional life has to offer, I guess. I spent my first formative years as a reporter in Los Angeles, and Scientology was everywhere there. So I think I also got a taste of the first cult I came across was actually Scientology. And then in New Zealand, immigrated to New Zealand 20 years ago, established myself as a foreign correspondent here. I've written 3 previous books. And then the journalism, well, I fell into it quite unexpectedly. It wasn't really planned, but it happened. It just happened by me coming across someone who used to live in a cult in New Zealand.
Now, I'd like you to get them to pairs. And with those people who haven't got ongoing partners, try to get somebody that they've had some sort of a sexual relationship with over the last 3 months or so.
Your book, Cult Trip, mainly deals with 3 different cults. Anke, can you give us an overview of the book as well as a little bit about each of the coercive groups that it covers?
Yeah, the book starts off with Centrepoint. That was a former sex and therapy cult from the human potential movement here in New Zealand, and quite unmatched even on a global scale, because so many people from Centrepoint went to jail later on when it all fell over in the 90s for sexual abuse of children and drug manufacturing, when those drugs were taken with the kids there. It was a huge social experiment that failed, and a utopian dream that turned into a collective nightmare. And I researched the aftermath of it all, and stepped into this cesspool of unresolved trauma and survivors who never spoken about what happened to them when they lived there as teenagers or children. So that's a huge part of my book, and probably the most horrific and the hardest part to read. The middle part is called Toxic Tantra, where I dive into some new age groups like Agama Yoga, an international yoga tantra cult that's still going actually in Thailand on Koh Phangan. I spent just a bit more lightweight time at the Osho Meditation Resort in Pune. And then the last part is another big investigation into Gloriavale. That's a fundamentalist Christian cult here on the west coast in New Zealand that is also still going. And what binds them all and how I've tied it all together is the sexual abuse that goes on in there, and also my personal story of what all this did to me, and the endeavors I had myself as maybe an accidental sex culturist in some of those groups is also part of the book. So it's also making of being a culturalist and what I came up against.
Okay, let's concentrate on one of those cults, Gloriavale. Now, this is a group that people may have heard of thanks to various documentaries as well as quite a few infamous court cases. Anke, for those who don't know, what is the Gloriavale cult all about, and when did it start?
I think it's fair to say that Gloriavale is like the real life version of Gilead from The Handmaid's Tale. So it's a community of about 500 to 600 people. Most of them actually were born into Gloriavale because they grow by multiplication, not necessarily because people join them from the outside. Gloriavale was started in the 70s by this charismatic preacher from Australia called Neville Cooper, who renamed himself Hope for Christian, and his followers called themselves the Cooperites for quite a while. And then they relocated to this very remote piece of bush, lots of farmland on the west coast here in New Zealand, and it's called Gloriavale. And they are fundamentalist Christians. They have no possessions. Families live in one big room together, often with their 10 to 15 children, all eat together, all work very hard around the clock, long hours. They're very industrious, very productive, lots of agricultural products, dairy farming, and so on. And they live, they have a very, very conservative interpretation of the Bible, where women are subjugated by men and have basically no rights, nothing to say. They're just working in breeding machines, and they're also there to keep their husbands sexually happy. It's very much part of the doctrine. Teenagers get married off as soon as that's legally possible. They have no right in choosing their own partners. Everyone wears a blue uniform. The women have these long clothes, like all the way to the bottom, and they're not allowed to show any skin. So it's very modest appearance, but actually there is a huge focus on sexuality within the cult as well. And there is a very there's a culture of sexual abuse and emotional and spiritual abuse. It's a textbook cult, and it's been going on for 50 years.
And you said you referred to it as having a problem with slave labor.
Gloriavale is currently in the courts. There have been a number of court cases. The one that's ongoing at the moment is an employment case, where basically it's a slave labor course, a court case. Children have been exploited there, and are probably still being exploited for having to work long hours after school, before school. 15, 16, 17-year-old girls, 7 days a week, from 5 a.m. till 7 p.m. in the kitchen. And it's brutal. It's a gulag, really. And let's not forget that their leader, former leader, late leader, Hope for Christian, who's now dead, he was a sexual predator who went to jail for sexual abuse of one of the, not just one, but one of the cases was a young woman from the community, and he gave quote-unquote marriage advice to her, but actually raping her with an object. Now, the people within Gloriavale have always been told that he has been persecuted for his faith. So the court cases, or the real reason for him being in prison, has been suppressed within Gloriavale. People are deliberately kept away from any information from the outside. The outside world is seen as evil. People are kept in fear, and if they leave or are being kicked out for having done something wrong, they are shunned by their family. And it's pretty horrific what goes on there, and I think the world needs to know about it.
And you've actually been to Gloriavale and met them, isn't that right?
I've been there twice. So the first time I went there was for their concert that they hold every second year. And it's like a big sort of Disney-like family musical entertainment thing that they put on for free for tax reasons, so that they can keep their charitable status. And yeah, it's a bizarre thing. And I sneaked in there under a false name, because I think I was already blacklisted at that stage, because I'd written a few pieces about them and was quite critical of them. And that was really interesting, because I thought, wow, people just flock here to listen to their concert, and then they take this bread and butter home with them as a gift from them. And Gloriavale is such a misogynistic place. Women are subjugated there. They suffer. There are human rights violations on a massive scale. And I wonder, if this was a racist community and their racism was built on, how they interpret the Bible, because that's what they do with the suppression of women. Would people also go there and support them and not have a problem with this? Or wouldn't there be picket lines outside their concert? So, and the second time I went there was at the end of my research. I just drove in there with my husband at the wheel, actually, which I think did help that I had a man with me, because as a woman, you just have such low status. And I surprised the leader there, and we sat down for an interview, which was really unusual, because they never give interviews. So I'm probably the only person that I know of that had a chance to speak to their current leader and put some hard questions to him. And yeah, it's a bizarre place, Mark. It's very weird. It's like the Truman Show in some ways, because it looks so idyllic and like from another era, from another world. And the many children, the trucks, the prams, the women in their long flowing clothes, the big lawns, and they were just setting up there for a festival, or not a festival, a celebration day, because they just bought another big piece of land and paid that off. It felt very bizarre. If you actually know what goes on behind the scenes and behind the sweet exterior, and how brutal that is for so many people there. It was fascinating, and it was also quite disturbing.
Well, Gloriavale has seen its fair share of controversy, its leaders and members being the focus of various court cases, as you said. Anke, how has the law dealt with this controversial group, and what do you think the cult's ultimate fate will be?
The authorities have left it too late. It's too little too late. Finally, now we're seeing all these court cases, not just for slave labor, also sexual abuse and employment law. There's a whole wave of court cases hitting Gloriavale, but that's taken decades, and it's taken so much effort from people who've left Gloriavale and also their supporters, the Gloriavale Leavers Support Trust. It's an initiative of volunteers basically doing this work. So, good question. What's going to happen? We'll see. I mean, something's got to give. And the question is, are the Gloriavale leaders able to give up power? Are they truly able to change a system from within that is in itself so toxic and so abusive? And also, if you think in terms of the employment and slave labor, if all these people who've worked for decades, who were born into Gloriavale, who never saw a penny, if they need to be paid for these years, is Gloriavale going to survive that financially? So we'll see what comes out of it. But also, let's not forget, this is a home for so many people, so you can't just take that away from them either. It is a big legal question, but also also an ethical dilemma, what to do with this community. But first of all, I think we have to see some accountability and some justice done before the healing can start.
Anke, what about the people who have escaped the Gloriavale cult? You've met quite a few of them. What have they been through, and how are they doing?
They're like refugees from another planet, not just another country, Mark. Honestly, they have to learn so much. Some of the former girls, they don't even know what their favorite color is when they leave. They never learn to think for themselves. They've never bought things for themselves in the shop. They don't know how an EFTPOS, a money card works, or setting up a bank account. They've never worn normal, or what we consider normal clothes. It's a huge thing just to even step out of the blue uniform and take your headscarf off as a woman, even though you don't agree what it stands for. It's such a huge cultural shift. And I feel for those people who've left, especially the young ones who had no choice, who grew up in there, who were kicked out basically overnight with nothing, no money to their name, out into a world where they don't know anybody, were put on a bus, got $50 or whatever to get to the next town, and that's that. And they're left on their own. It's brutal. And they don't have any outside contacts. They've been brought up to believe that the world outside is evil, and they really need help and compassion. So I have nothing but respect for some of these really brave people who've come out of there, especially one woman who is in my book, Virginia Courage. And yeah, we're going to hear more especially from those women who are laying sexual abuse charges against some of their abusers, and they're actually bringing some of their men from Gloriavale down, and all power to them.
It's interesting that the lady you mentioned, Anke, is called Courage, Victoria Courage.
Yeah, she really deserves her last name. People in Gloriavale all have these interesting names, and New Zealanders like to mock that quite a bit because they have, the former leader, Hopeful Christian, or you have names like Faithful or Pilgrim or even Zealot, or, all these aspirational names, and it's easy to mock that. And at the same time, I think it doesn't help if we just see this as a freak show and make fun of it. These are people who either really need help or they need to be held accountable, depending on what role they've played inside Gloriavale.
But it's appropriate for Victoria because she does have the courage to speak out.
Absolutely, yeah.
You found yourself exploring a controversial New Age group not too long ago, and you talk about this in your book. What was this group all about, and when did you realize that you had to distance yourself from it?
That is ISTA, which stands for International School of Temple Arts. And I didn't go in there to investigate them. It was actually a great time in my life where I wanted to explore my sexuality and spirituality, and they had a lot on offer that I actually found really, really helpful and fascinating. And I got my intensity junkie fix there. They call themselves shamanic, or you could say it's a bit of neo-tantra in there, a bit of the scream therapies from the 1970s. So I personally haven't been harmed in there and had only good experiences, but I see them quite critically now because of the many, many reports that have now been collected about wrongdoing, about coercive, manipulative dynamics in there. So I'm still reluctant to call them a cult because they are currently going through a process of mediation and accountability, and I think we need to see what comes out of that. And it will be a real indicator how culty they are, whether they can take criticism on board and are able to reform themselves, or whether they just double down and litigate against their critics. So some of that we've already seen. So I've distanced myself from them, and I'm sad to see that so many of the things that were once great for me, I now see through a different lens as that they are potentially also really problematic. But I guess it's typical for anyone who's come out of a high demand group. That's what you experience. You miss the good stuff, but you don't want to put up with the bad stuff.
But while you were with ISTA, you saw some definite cult parallels. Is that right?
It's tricky. I'm still unpacking that a little bit. Looking back now, I see things I go, oh, no, that wasn't okay. But at the time, I probably turned a blind eye, or I kind of got lost a bit in the mix. So, I mean, this was also a few years before the Me Too movement. I'm not saying that as an excuse, but just that I think everyone's perception probably is a bit more sharpened around this now. And back then I was probably more in the throes of, wow, I'm experiencing something amazing here and it's good for me and I want more of that. And I didn't want to look at the shadow side so much. But the shadow hasn't been addressed enough, and I think it's come around and caused them problems, and these problems need to be dealt with. And I'm really supportive of the people who are trying to open their eyes and basically giving them free input how to do better, which is actually something an organization should be doing on their own behalf, instead of just shutting down their critics and calling it a witch hunt or gossiping or so. So in the way how ISTA reacts to its critics, I think that's been the disappointing part for me, to see that on social media, and to see how their initial response to a lot of the criticism has been. That's actually what made me go, oh, whoa, no, that is not good. People make mistakes, people learn, but if you're not willing to take things on board, I think that's not a good sign, and that's where I draw the line. That's why I step back.
Anke, are there any red flags that you see in today's new age world and all these various wellness cults which are coming out? What do you see that's going on?
There are so many red flags. The problem is that we don't always see groups as cults who might be emerging cults, because most people have a misconception of what a cult is, and they don't really see their yoga class or meditation group or women's circle, full moon circle, whatever it is, anything. It's not about the content. Anything, any group, any conglomeration of people under a certain banner or with a certain belief system or a common goal can turn into a culty group. And I really want to raise awareness that it's people like you and me, and who are interested in these topics in general, who might end up being sucked into something that doesn't look like a cult to them from the outside. No one joins a cult. Everyone goes into something that looks like a good thing to them. And also there's always good content. So I really want to raise the awareness that cults are not sinister places at first. They look great and shiny and sparkly and are full of love and fun and great stuff that's exciting. And it's often when it gets a bit too exciting, or when people are so on their workshop high and they don't really apply their critical thinking anymore, and everyone gets with the program, and you chase the next level and you spend more and more money for the next course so you can stay with the group and get the next fix. That is already a red flag, even though it might not scream cult and it might not be so intentional from the get-go, but these dynamics, they creep in. And I think it's really important that we don't just look at the most horrific examples of cults, but we nip these things in the bud and see them where they creep up, so that we can actually have safer and more enjoyable spaces, whether it's in the conscious sexuality neo-tantra world, or in the wellness world, or spirituality. All of these things are not necessarily bad, but it's the coercive dynamics that creep in, and that's where I see a lot of work that still needs to be done, a lot more awareness. It's the next frontier, really, after being more trauma aware and maybe more consent aware, that people just need to become more cult aware as well and see where it's happening right around them.
Well, we have books like yours, of course, but do you think it should be taught perhaps in schools or colleges, what to look out for?
Absolutely. I think cult education in schools is just as important as sex education, and also media literacy. It's quite a similar dynamic, falling into cult or falling down conspiracy rabbit holes. So this encompasses the whole field of false beliefs, basically, and how they can mess with people's minds, and the hold they can have over people, and how they can destroy families and friendships and relationships. It's no different whether someone's fallen hard for anti-vax, radicalized conspiracy theories, or into a cult where they don't really know how to unentangle themselves. So yes, it would be great to start at schools to raise awareness.
And you're doing a lot of work with your organization, FACT, isn't that right? FACT.
Right. FACT is short for Fight Against Conspiracy Theories, and it's an activist group that was started here in New Zealand during the pandemic. Yes, I'm very proud of the work that we've done, and also another Facebook group that we've started called Rabbit Hole Resistance, which has become a bit of a refuge for people whose friends or family members have fallen down the rabbit hole. And all of this is really linked with the cult research because the dynamics are the same. In order to help someone out of this, you can't really criticize them for their choice or tell them that their guru is bad or their belief is completely wrong. Actually, what you can do is just be there for them, create some sense of normality, talk about something else than their cult or their conspiracy belief, and be that person who's still there for them no matter what, because the day will come when something's got to give, something cracks, and they might have a realization that they've been taken for a ride or they've fallen into some false beliefs. And it's really important then that there are people who haven't shamed them, who haven't mocked them, and who love them no matter what. So I'm advocating for more compassion also for people in cults, and not just to look at them as freaks or weak or stupid, because that's actually not true. Everyone is susceptible.
Well, it's tremendous work that you've done, Anke, and I'm sure that Cult Trip won't be the last of your project. So what else is coming up on your agenda, and what can you tell us about?
I'm actually returning to the scene of the crime of one of the cults I've investigated, and that is Koh Phangan in Thailand, Tantra Island, as Vice recently called it, where the Agama drama took place. So I'm going to be there in June to talk about my book. I've got an invitation for 2 events, so I'm excited about that. I'll be in Munich, I'll be in Berlin, I'll be at the Byron Bay Writers Festival and other events. So yeah, check out my website where I will announce my events. And also I'm trying to get more culty conversations started here in New Zealand. I've started a Facebook group under that name, and also there are quite a few people here who would like to see a government-funded professional agency get off the ground that helps cult survivors and does cult prevention like other countries have them. So that's one of my pet projects that I'd love to see happening this year at some stage. So yeah, stay tuned and check out my my website, where I will make a few announcements about what's coming next.
I will leave links to your books and social media in the description below. And all that's left to say is thank you very much indeed, Anke, for coming on to Talk Beliefs.
Thank you, Mark. It's been really great talking to you.